Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing a brand new review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Smashing Machine, which is now out in cinemas, following its festival debuts, wide release, of course starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, directed by Benny Safdie, and I'm here to give my thoughts on this sports biopic, which I've been looking forward to quite a lot actually, based off a few people I know who have seen it early, a couple of other background things I'll be talking about, but in the meantime, I do want to hear from people, so please do comment your thoughts on The Smashing Machine. If you've seen it, if you haven't, if you're a fan of UFC, if you're not, I'm really curious to know how this goes down to different people. I know there was a documentary based on Mark Kerr, which I think came out in 2002, which has the same title as this, that I have not seen. And it's very worth me saying that going into this film, my knowledge of UFC is very, very low. The most I know about UFC is the names of a couple of fighters and the fact they're owned by TKO, who own WWE, and The Rock is a board member of that, which is very interesting when you look at this film too. But I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the film, the story, the characters, the performances, the music, and a few other things. It's something I've been looking forward to seeing, as I mentioned, and I'm going to sort of kickstart that with, I mentioned I don't have a UFC background. The story of Mark Kerr, I was not familiar with him or his story, so I went into this quite open. I'd seen the trailer, I'd seen the photo The Rock posted on, I think, day one of shooting last year. I love Emily Blunt, so I was quite interested in this as a project, and a big draw for me was Benny Safdie. I love Good Time, I love Uncut Gems. I've been a big fan of him. I know obviously he normally co-directs with Josh, who's gone off to do, the Timothy Chalamet film coming out in a couple of months. I forgot the name of that, which is about table tennis, which has been all over the trailers for this too. So the Safdie brothers has gone a different way. And of course Benny Safdie people may recognise from his acting performances. He was in Obi-Wan Kenobi, Licorice Pizza, Oppenheimer, a few other things. So he's quite recognisable, and I really do like him as an actor and as a director. So with the sports genre itself, my lack of UFC, I was kind of sold on this. And then The Rock came on board, which I've got very, very up and down background with as an actor. I loved his earlier stuff. I didn't mind some of his family films. I loved him like the Fast Five era for a few years after. And I think he's sort of become a bit tired, a bit of a caricature of background politics within WWE and him as an actor / producer and different other things. So I was excited to him to have the ability to act, and that's been a big selling point of this, that is this going to be a different performance from The Rock, as he has been so typecasted by his own doing with his production company. I'm going to be answering that question, and I should really tell you the story. So for those that haven't seen this film, unfamiliar, this of the IMDb plot synopsis, this is the story of mixed martial arts and UFC champion Mark Kerr. As simple as that. Of course, it is a biopic, a sports biopic, and I guess I should talk about my thoughts on the story, which is going to be interesting. That as a sports film, I thought this was fine. Mark Kerr himself, as I was unfamiliar with him, I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't aware of any potential controversies behind the scenes, away from it, or things that have or haven't happened. So going into this quite empty, hearing everybody raving about The Rock's performance, I was quite sold on that, if I'm totally honest. And as an overview of the story, I think it does a very good job of telling this story on screen, but I think I've got a couple of issues with it, that it doesn't feel fully fleshed out, that whilst this is covering a 4-year period in a 2-hour runtime, there are certain things this does a great job at building up and trying to figure out, and then I feel that it lacks the substance, no pun intended on substance abuse, of certain things. So we deal with the introduction to MMA, the earlier days of it, before certain moves were illegal, before obviously it's the juggernaut that is obviously UFC now. I didn't know what to think of those earlier things, so I was interested in seeing that, and it kind of glosses over how UFC was before, which is a shame because the fight sequences are shot and directed in a really unique way. I know they use 16mm reels for this. They also use old VHS camcorders, so there's a real grainy old school look that really compensates the film, and it gave it a distinct look. It looked actually great on the big screen, and in terms of framing and capturing performance, it did a wonderful job of those. But as I mentioned, then when you've gone away from the sports side of things, we get his home life, and I struggled with this, that we have him getting addicted to painkillers, which is completely understandable. That might come at that point in time with that sport, and it feels like the substance abuse of sorts is glossed over by a few scenes, And then we've got his home life relationship with Dawn Staples, played wonderfully by Emily Blunt, who's a great supporting actress in this film. And I don't think she gets as fleshed out as she deserves to be. That she's a very up and down character, and where her story ends within this story, it feels quite sudden and it doesn't feel earned. And I think that my very minor issues are the fact that at times it's trying to juggle the sport, the substance, the relationship issues. It never really commits to each of those things. And I think that lets the film down a little bit, and that's what stops the film from being great. And there's some really good stuff that does work, as I mentioned, the sequences with MMA, the performers that are involved within that. But it just feels a bit lacking. And this isn't a film I can sit there and say I've seen this film 100 times. Maybe Mark Kerr's story isn't those other things. But it's very difficult looking at it from a biopic perspective to stand out by its own account, and it doesn't away from the UFC stuff. You can take a film similarly like The Wrestler, which is totally incomprehensibly about what it is to be an aging veteran of that and what life's done to him. You can look at something like The Fighter, where it details substance abuse with family relationships. There are so many great sports. We've got Warrior, which is quite easily the best MMA film ever done. Obviously, it's not based off real life, but Warrior is a family drama whilst having cage fighting. So this one's a bit of a nomad for me, if I'm totally honest. That I like it, and the things I like most I'm going to talk about now, which are the performances. Dwayne Johnson playing Mark Kerr, quite easily The Rock's best acting performance. It's not really hard to say that as a tone. I'm happy for him that he's able to do so. If I was to look at his performances in terms of actual great acting or something that isn't a caricature of itself, obviously take away WWE side of things too, I thought he was amazing in Pain and Gain, the Michael Bay film, and until this, that was his best performance. And the conversation about this film is The Rock going to be nominated for an Oscar? I think there's a serious possibility he is, and I don't mind if he is. At this point in time, I couldn't name you the 5 performances or who the 6 or 7 are that are going to be discussing it. I know we're going to be talking about Leo of one battle after another. We're obviously going to be talking about The Rock as well. I'm sure people will be talking about Daniel Day-Lewis when Anemone releases. It's too early to know what that lineup is going to be. There are people predicting things, but it's just too early days. So if The Rock does get his nomination, then at this point in time, I say it is one of the best male performances of the year, but I don't think it would be a performance that wins it. I think this is like Stallone in Creed, where the nomination is a victory within itself. And that's not to discredit him as a performer. It's just a very different film, especially for the Academy Award type nominators. Look at the fact that Zac Efron didn't get anything for The Iron Claw, and he absolutely should have. It fits into that category, but this has had the marketing, this has the festival circuits to its advantage. So I do think Dwayne Johnson is great in this. And as Mark Kerr, he's a very vulnerable individual. He's so softly spoken. His presence, whilst he is huge, and we all know The Rock is massive, it isn't someone that is sort of swagging around as this absolute monster. He's quite calm, he's composed, he's very polite, he seems to have a heart, and that adds to the brutality of what they're doing when they are in the octagon or the ring or the cage, whatever they want to call it. So I've really enjoyed his performance. It was against type. It was Dwayne Johnson playing somebody very vulnerable, and I think he does a great job at that. And I would love to see more performances by Dwayne Johnson doing this. I know there's the Scorsese film, which everyone's been talking about. I think it got announced last year or the start of this year. Whenever that films, I think it's going to be Scorsese's film after his next one. That's what I'm most curious by, is him in a Scorsese film, if that makes it. On a sideways note, talking about Dawn Staples, played by Emily Blunt, I loved her in this. I think she gives the best performance of the film. Not in a discreditable way to The Rock, but Emily Blunt left me with a bit more, maybe because there's more to her character. However, this is a character, as I said, that doesn't feel fully developed, that should there be a couple of more scenes by herself, because she doesn't come across as very likeable. But then when you realise that she has some health issues or mental health issues within this film, you do sit there contemplating that why is that not addressed a little bit earlier on. So I think her presentation isn't the best in this, but Emily Blunt is wonderful. Obviously she worked with The Rock before on Jungle Cruise. And another MMA fighter turned actor who I had no idea about, Ryan Bader in this film plays Mark Coleman. Now I couldn't tell if he's a world champion or has been a world champion, or if he's just done a couple of fights in MMA. I was surprised at how much I liked him in this. Again, because the marketing campaign's been Emily Blunt, it's been The Rock, you don't really think about other people being in this. I didn't even know that Usyk was going to be in this, the current boxing world champion. That completely threw me off guard watching it for the first time. But I really liked Ryan Bader in this film. Mark Corman's a very likeable character. And as this functions as a sports film, and this is credit I'm giving Benny Safdie for, thankfully, I know, although I mentioned Warrior, this isn't a film where it's just about, all right, let's just get in the ring, beat each other up, take our emotions out in the ring. It's a film that deals with the loss within sport, the mentality and psychology that happens with characters in this is something I haven't really seen before. And as I don't know anything about MMA, it's interesting to see it in a newer sport as such, that how were they reacting to their first loss, you know, in the 90s? How were their relationships with one another whilst they're rivals in the ring? When that match is over, they're friends, they're taking photos. I really liked that dynamic. And I think Benny Safdie chose to show it in a really unique and different way to traditional sports films. And they're the things that work best about this. Is the MMA side is the strength of the film. Not just the competitions, not just how they shoot it or the performances, the physical performance of the actors. It's the presentation of it. The sound design in this is quite horrific when they're fighting, and you can hear bones being broken or squashed, and it's very uncomfortable, and it wants you to be uncomfortable watching that. It isn't meant to be taken lightly, seen as the joyous entertainment, and how the other people react in that, I think, sells it. So absolutely fair play for Benny Safdie's director. Shooting it on 16mm, I mentioned already, I absolutely loved that. It makes the film work within a time capsule within itself. And as I kind of said, my biggest issues with the film is that it's light on the substance abuse, but it has other strengths that do back that up. It is a very good film, but it is not a great film for me, which is a shame, but it's totally understandable. And something I also want to talk about is the soundtrack, which is done by Nala Sinefro. This is her first film score. Quite a small score, but it's very unique. There's obviously a lot of needle drops to happen in this, but the score itself is really interesting. It works with the UFC side of things when they're in the ring or the aftermath of it. I really like what she does with this soundtrack. It's quite unique. I think it's something people will be talking about, and I think she's going to be a composer to follow for the future. I'm really curious to see what she does next. I couldn't see any of her films on her IMDb that are upcoming. I think she's worked on one TV show before, so it's very curious to follow that because I loved the score on this film. And I'm going to kind of end this as we're moving to award season, festival season, all that stuff with the Oscars talk. I mentioned about The Rock. I certainly think the big campaign for this will be this film up for Best Lead Actor. That feels like the marketing drill that's going to go on. As I said, I think he could be nominated. I don't think he would win, but I have no issue with a nomination for this. Emily Blunt, I'd be really curious by in supporting actress. And is there a chance this gets nominated for Best Film? I could see this nominated for Best Film over Best Director. Nothing against Benny Safdie, but it feels like the type of film where there would be quite a few nominations, maybe a win. Something like Best Makeup's going to absolutely be in the conversation with the transformation on The Rock, especially with some of the fight sequences and how they look after the matches. So this will be spoken about around award season. Whether it's peaked early in marketing, I do not know, but I'm going to be interested to follow this up to see how it performs, and again, see what goes on with The Rock in this one. And that leads into my final thoughts on this film. Did I like this film? Yes. Do I recommend this film to you guys to watch at home? I absolutely do. Try and see it on the big screen. It doesn't demand the big screen experience, but it was great to be in a sold out screening yesterday. Whilst it's a small screen at my cinema, it was great to see on that bigger screen. You can appreciate the cinematography a little bit more, what they're doing with the reel. It does feel like you are watching something from the 90s, and they absolutely nailed the aesthetics of what it means and what it did. And Mark Kerr himself, it was very interesting to find out a lot more about it. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but my favourite scene of the film is the final scene of the film, which is something unique that I haven't seen films do before, particularly with biopics. I did think of Rush, the wonderful biopic from 2013 done by Ron Howard, a couple of times during it, which is a great testament for me. But yeah, that's how I'm going to kind of round out this review, so I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you've seen the film, as I said, please do comment. I do want to know what people think of this one. In the meantime, we're heading into festival season now. I'm going to be at London Film Festival. I don't know for how long yet. I don't know how many reviews there will be. At the minimum, it's going to be 3 that I'm locked in for. it could end up going up to anything between 6 and 15. So I'm figuring out my schedule day to day. I'm going to decide during the festival what I do when I do it. So do stick around, there's a lot more films, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.